I'm Jane Hansen. This week in the arena, the power of prayer. According to a 2005 Newsweek and BeliefNet poll of over 1,000 Americans, 74% said they prayed several times a week. 64% said they prayed every day. But what is prayer? Does it work? And if so, how do we know? Joining us is Monsignor Kieran Harrington, the Director of Communications for the Diocese of Brooklyn, Elizabeth Scalia, contributor to First Things and author of the blog, The Anchoress, and Monsignor Thomas Caserta, pastor of the Shrine Church of St. Bernadette and former spiritual director for seminarians. I have to tell all three of you that I am rather surprised. I know you're not, but I'm surprised by this statistic that 89% of teenagers pray in a normal week.
Your daughter is how old?
19.
Do you think she prays?
If she does, she doesn't tell me.
Okay, that's a really good question. It's something you should ask her. I bet she does. I bet she prays not just because she's taking exams, but because she's away at school and she's feeling lonely, and because she's feeling insecure about something. And I think prayer wells up very naturally from us.
You had a virtual Lourdes at your church a couple of weeks ago.
Just 2 weeks ago, it was an experience in which Lourdes, the experience of going to Lourdes, is brought to people who aren't able to go to Lourdes themselves. And the number of teenage people in the church was really incredible. Afterwards, a 16-year-old guy came up to me and said, "I had such a good time tonight." You would thought he was describing a rock concert, but he was genuinely engaged by this very traditional piety of our church. So I'm not surprised by the statistic at all.
I find when you go,
yeah.
my church is right here in Prospect Heights, and Prospect Heights is basically a young community. And how many young people, 20, 30-somethings, are walking into the church to say a prayer? And maybe in terms of, how do we describe what prayer is? It's pretty hard to say what a prayer is. But walking into a place and just kind of, taking in the grandeur of God and taking in the majesty of God and beauty of God's creation. This is all part of the prayer experience, and I find it very, very common.
Do you have to be in a church to have it be a real official prayer?
No, I think that what Elizabeth was saying, I think a lot of these kids, when they're saying they're praying at home when there's strife with their families or when their friends are in difficult circumstances. I think there are a whole host of reasons. I think that people's the places where they're praying are not simply in church. I think it's in all sorts of different places.
So let's just talk about the idea of prayer, though, and how important it is in the religious or in the lives of everybody these days. Obviously, we're going through, just finishing on Lent, we're going through Holy Week, and people give more attention to it this time of year.
They do, and they often say, I want to pray more, I wish I could pray more, I don't know how to do that. I don't know if I'm doing it right. People seem to approach prayer with an idea that it's a very complicated thing. But if you read the saints who were experts at prayers, I'm talking about, the doctors of the church like Teresa of Avila, St. John of the Cross, they say repeatedly, prayer is simply the lifting up of your heart to God and in openness and welcome. It's simply saying, I love you, and then being able to receive or to try to receive the I love you in return. I think we're so confused about what prayer is now and so uncertain about it because we're so plugged into our iPods, we're so plugged into technology and instrumentation that we're very often just unacquainted with silence. Can't hear the still song.
Why does it have to be silent?
Yeah, well, and I think it's important to realize that even modern technology can be used. I notice, on Facebook, you take a look at the Holy Father in terms of the late Holy Father, in terms of the chanting of the Our Father. I mean, modern media is being used in a way to connect people. eBreviary.com.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's all these sorts of things are being utilized
You can
help
get
people.
An app for your iPhone to read the Divine Office.
If you take
or
it on your
Rosary.
iPhone, you can find out what the Mass schedule is, where confessions are, what time confessions are.
There's a great iPhone app where you have the Rosary, and it goes bead
right.
by bead through the Rosary.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, all the mysteries and everything.
Saints of the Day.
What I find is that I will get people who will forward me some of those, like what used to be old pen pal letters, and now they're, if you don't do this, something bad's going to happen to you. But those that they send are about prayer.
Right.
I've always thought that it's a bad thing that for so many years in confession, your penance was a prayer, because it kind of equated in people's minds this whole concept of prayer being a difficulty or a punishment, instead of a thing that should be natural and welcome and contemplative, and I think really just so much a part of who we are and our makeup.
Don't you think one of the difficulties is that people confuse methods of prayer with praying?
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And truthfully, the penance after confession, there was nothing magic about the 4 Our Fathers or the 3 Hail Marys, but rather it was meant to be a time where you took, the occasion to repent of the sins that you had committed and ask God for the grace and strength to avoid them in the future. And that, goes to the issue of education today in prayer and formation in prayer. But I think that making that distinction between methods of prayer and praying. My favorite definition of prayer comes from Teresa of Avila: conversation with one whom we know loves us.
Then why are we saying things like the Hail Mary and the Our Father and the prayers that we know by rote or
because
memorization?
rote prayers are so valuable to us. If you're someone who hasn't prayed for a long time, but you were taught your Our Fathers and your Hail Marys, and you come into a difficult time in your life, and you haven't got an idea of what to say, you just have to throw yourself out there and say, I've got the Our Father, I'll say the Our Father, and it's the springboard to deeper prayer and more personal prayer. It's absolutely essential to have some of that rote prayer in your back. I recommend everybody buying something like this. You can usually find them at the back of a church. All of our grandmothers use them. And it's a little prayer book that has things like morning prayer, an act of love, an act of contrition, the Our Father, the Glory Be, the Angelus. If you're really stuck, this is a good place to start.
Why do we sometimes send a greeting card to someone that we did not compose ourselves? We find something in it that expresses our feelings that we are not able to do. And I think that's what rote prayer does. It's very, very important. As a matter of fact, Teresa says that at moments when mental prayer is not possible, return to verbal or rote prayer as a way of being in God's presence.
And remember that first off, rote prayer is not exclusive to Catholics, right? I mean, Muslims have rote prayer, Hindus have rote prayer, the Jews. I mean, this is common to all religious traditions. But the important thing about what rote prayer also enables us to do is it enables us to free our mind of a lot of distractions, so that we're able to focus on, for instance, the mysteries of the Rosary, right? That's the whole point of saying the Hail Marys, is so that our mind is able to focus on the particular mysteries of the Rosary, whether it be the joyful, the glorious, the luminous, or the sorrowful mystery. So, and just to go back to the notion of confession, though, Elizabeth, in the church there was the church prescribed penances based on particular sins, and it was a way of intuiting how to kind of connect somebody with the grace of God. And I think that now that's gone. There are no more manuals which kind of tell a priest, this is the penance for this kind of sin. But I do think that priests generally are trying to connect the penitent to see the grace of God acting in their life. And that's really what the penance, which is typically a prayer, is supposed to do, is help them see the grace of God that is working in their life.
Do you think that should be back in confession, to have a certain kind of manual for prayers?
I would say no. As a confessor myself, I would say no. I think the training that priests get in the seminary, and then the sense that you develop over the years of celebrating this sacrament with people, helps you give penances that are not only meaningful, but the old term used to be medicinal, that there is supposed to be something curative about the penance.
I understand that. And I have a question for you, because then we're going to take a break. But do people only pray or tend to pray a lot more when they need something?
I think there are all kinds of circumstances in life that drive people to prayer. Personal need is one of them, but I also know many, many people who pray out of great gratitude for the gift of life, for circumstances that have occurred in their lives. So I'd be unwilling to say more people pray out of need than other reasons. I think there are a lot of things that drive people to prayer.
Thank you for being with us. You're going to leave us now after this break, and you two are going to remain. And by the way, I still have my prayer book I got for my first communion, and I use it. I carry it with me when I travel. Okay. We'll be right back, and Monsignor Caserta, again, thank you for being with us.
You're very welcome.
When we come back, we'll be joined by the spiritual director for Cathedral Prep Seminary, and he'll continue this discussion on the power of prayer, so stay with us. Welcome back. Our topic today is prayer, and joining our discussion now is Father John Cush, the spiritual director for Cathedral Prep Seminary. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate being back.
Now, you talk with teenagers a lot.
Absolutely. We have 161 young men at Cathedral Prep Seminary, all of whom are open to the idea, the vocation to priesthood. So we try to develop in them good spiritual habits. Each boy is assigned a spiritual director, and I'm the head spiritual director of Cathedral, and we try to meet with them at least about 6 to 8 times a year, and anytime they want to come. But what I find with the kids, a lot of it is not only convincing them of the need to pray, besides just when you want something or you need something, but also to realize to be consistent in prayer, forming good habits of prayer, whatever vocation they choose in their life. I think a discipline in prayer, a consistency in prayer, a dedication, realizing it's your time with God.
Before I was a priest, I was working in Washington, and I remember barging into one of my colleagues' office, and he was about the same age as me, 30 years old. And I opened the door and walked in, and he was saying the rosary in the office. And I remember being kind of shocked by this, and I kind of said, I knew he was a Catholic guy and we were friends, but so I kind of said, "Oh, I'm really sorry." He says, "No, come in. We can say a prayer together." So we finished the rosary together, and then I said to him, "So this is kind of odd, praying at your office." And he says, "I do every day for my family," and I was very, very impressed by that. Here's a young guy who is maybe 30 years old, maybe a little younger, and he was praying for his wife and his children, praying the rosary right in his office in the middle of the day, door closed and everything. It was really beautiful.
I think more people pray at work than people understand. Yeah. My husband does. He keeps a little book of scripture in his desk, and he every day pretty much dives into that at some point or another, just as a way to pull away from the stress of the day.
Just to finish, one final thought about teenagers. I believe that you actually have kind of a prayer discipline for them.
Believe it or not, yes. I was a friend of mine, a Jesuit priest, Father John Pitteret, had passed on a little thing to me, and actually it's kind of nice. It may sound old-fashioned, but just little things like this. If it's not a great inconvenience, do your prayer in a church or in a chapel. And we're blessed enough, obviously, at the Prep Seminary to have our own chapel. And one of the things I've asked the guys to do during Lent, give at least a minute a day on your own, outside of the daily Mass that they're required to go to, outside of adoration. Before you go home, before you go to lunch, just stop in, spend a little time. Go to a pew, genuflect, then kneel down. If you're wearing a watch, take it off, put it in your pocket. If you have a cell phone, iPod, or electronic device, turn it off. Note what time it is. Silently and slowly say one Our Father, one Hail Mary, one Glory Be. Getting back to what we said the last time, if you don't know something maybe extemporaneous to say to begin your conversation with God, but it's something as simple as that, trying to form good habits.
Doesn't it show that that's what requires upon us also? One of the things that's hard is, I remember one time as a kid, wanting to go up to church to pray. And I tried the door, and the door wouldn't open to the church. I tried another church, the door wouldn't open, a third door. And in some sense, I felt like I was being locked out from praying.
Sure.
And I think that people naturally want to go to church to pray, but that makes it important for us to make sure that we keep our churches open. And you know what? Something may get stolen. Someone may come in and make a little bit of a mess. But it's important that people be able to get into God's house. And Jane, I remember you telling me one time about you lighting candles in a church, and how important that was for you and at that point in your life.
And I still do that frequently.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I work a lot right around St. Patrick's Cathedral in Manhattan, and as we all know, that place is rarely shut down.
Right.
And you get to light real candles. Electronic
Oh yes, I don't like the electronic.
No,
You could come to
buttons.
my church. I have real candles.
Yeah, so there. But what what I was just thinking about is are we afraid to talk about how much we pray then? If there are just some of the statistics about how many people do pray on a daily basis, but we don't share that often.
I think prayer is kind of seen as like a private thing by so many people. And in reality, because it involves your relationship with God, it is a public thing. You know, we're all in this together. We're all united in our faith. We're all united in our love of God. So our ways of expressing our prayers might be private, but ultimately, I think that we're afraid to look at the idea that perhaps, I don't want people thinking I'm a religious nut, or I don't want something along those lines. But
and also prayer suggests that you believe all that, unsophisticated stuff.
It's
and
funny
cool people don't have faith.
The culture doesn't support it in the same way. The stories are told in our own diocese in Rockaway, that at noon the Angelus bell would ring at St. Rosalima in Rockaway, and the people, there would be silence on the beach as everybody would be praying the rosary, praying the Angelus. And so, this is something, the cultural context was something which supported a life of prayer. And you do see this again in Muslim countries, right? Because Muslims are they're required to pray 5 times a day, much like us in the Liturgy of the Hours, which the priests take on basically on behalf, the priests and religious take on behalf of the people. But it really is the prayer of all people. And the thing is that you're trying to sanctify the day. I think that maybe the difficulty for us today is that the culture, at least the Western culture, doesn't support that kind of environment of prayer in the way it does in the East.
A simple call to prayer, like a bell tolling. In
does.
many communities, the churches aren't allowed to toll the bells because it's noisy, and they feel that this is intruding on the neighbors. And so you've lost the Angelus bell going off at noon. My parish does it, but they do it so quietly that if you're not on parish grounds, you don't hear it.
Yeah. Well, what is the obligation of a Catholic to pray? Is there one? I mean, I know the priests and the clergy have the obligation of the hours and all that.
The first thing is realize that in the spiritual life, it's not a matter of simply yes or no, but the yes, every Catholic is required to pray. And the thing is you wouldn't just say you're required to pray. You would expect that you'd want to pray because you want a relationship with God.
Right.
So typically, what people ought to be looking for is to be able to get up in the morning, make a morning offering, say thank you God for this day, and when they go to bed to ask the Lord for forgiveness for their sins and and express gratitude for everything that has happened in that day. So morning prayer and evening prayer, certainly grace before meals, these are things which are I would suggest that in prayer life, the most important thing is there are hinges to your day. You have to get up, you have to go to bed, and you have to eat. And if you could kind of pray at those moments, and short prayers, in those days, giving gratitude to God, and gratitude is really such an important prayer, asking Him for blessings on the day, I think that's enough.
Absolutely, and I think what you're saying is so true. The idea of keeping those hinges, recognizing that they're natural parts of the day where we're calling out for the transcendent. A lot of the idea of the morning offering, something simple. We again look at my school. We do it every day. The prayer before they go home, the prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel. These are little ways, and these are habits of the heart that are formed. And whether the form of prayer is adoration or contrition or thanksgiving or supplication, whatever the prayer might be, it's a habit that's formed, and that consistency. I think that's really important to the day.
A lot of people find the Muslim call to prayer 5 times a day, very inspiring, and say, well, why don't we have something like that? And we do. But few people realize that we do within the church have the Liturgy of the Hours, which is prayer 7 times a day if you're doing it in its full solemnity. But many lay people, and I'm one of them, have taken to using the breviary for morning prayer and for evening prayer, and maybe if they can, compline at night before they go to sleep. And what this is directed liturgical prayer that follows the feast days, follows the liturgical calendar, and gives you 3 psalms and a small meditation. And depending on what hour you're speaking, perhaps one mother pray, and then you're going to end with the Our Father. And getting into the habit of praying morning and evening prayer with my breviary became such a life-enriching thing that I ended up becoming a professed Benedictine oblate because I wanted more. I wanted to understand prayer more, and I wanted to understand it within the context of community of people who were praying, and that ended up leading me to the Benedictines. But you'll see Dominican tertiaries doing this, and secular Franciscans, and Third Order Carmelites. They're all praying the breviary. And I know a Baptist who prays the breviary for morning prayer and vespers every single day.
Yeah, because basically what the breviary is are psalms. So they're psalms put into a and let me what's interesting is at least in my experiences, it always seems to connect with what's going on in my life. As you're praying, like I'm reading these psalms,
it's
first,
kind of the chicken or the egg in that case.
It's amazing. The Haiti earthquake.
Yeah,
when I read the Psalms the day after that earthquake, I was weeping because it was all about
it really touches you.
people's lives being upended and the rocks tumbling, and I got goosebumps.
So the liturgy of the hours basically are psalms, and then scriptural readings, and then readings from the fathers of the church or the councils, documents of the church. So basically, any Christian can read the liturgy of the hours and really profit by reading
and relate to them too. And it's so important that I think when we look at it, I know for the years of praying the breviary, Monsignor Harrington and I were in the college seminary together, and we were taught to do that in the college seminary. And you get into this habit, and without it, you miss it. We're obliged under penalty of sin, obviously, to pray, but everyone has this natural obligation. I want to spend my time with Jesus. I want to spend my time with the Lord. And without that, it's like air, water. We need it to get by in our day.
Yes, I can understand. I can understand that. We are going to take a break, but we'll continue this discussion and have some final thoughts about prayer in just a moment. Stay with us. And we are back, continuing our conversation on the power of prayer and its importance, especially as Catholics move into Holy Weekend towards Easter Sunday. So we were talking about the things that could help you in praying better and much more easily, and to be reminded. You have a magazine.
I brought a copy of Magnificat magazine. This is a magazine that can be subscribed to, and you can do it on Amazon.com or go to Magnificat.com. And what this is an abbreviated breviary of sorts. This has morning and evening prayer. It has Compline. It has the readings every day from Mass. It has brief meditations from some great Catholic writers. And if you want to get started in prayer and you're not entirely sure how to do it, or you don't know what to say in prayer, this is a great place to start. I have a son in college who said, I want to read Scripture. I don't know where to start. I don't know what to even begin with. I gave him a subscription to this, and he loves it because it's portable. You don't have to, you don't have to do it every day, but if you want to pray, it helps you.
Absolutely. User-friendly. And then, of course, you were suggesting earlier that to have symbols around your home.
Having a personal prayer space is a really excellent thing. Even if you can just find a corner somewhere, put an icon, a crucifix, a rosary, a candle, or something, a place that just helps you focus. And I know when I grew up, everybody had one of these in their house. Just a little place to kind of make you think, let me take a moment and get focused.
Think about how most people have a crucifix in their bedroom.
Absolutely.
Typically they had the crosses, the old crosses where you could put the cross for a sick call, right? So that when the priest would come, there'd be holy water and candles. I mean, those are things. Religious symbols are important to have in the house. Sacred Heart in the kitchen, just as a reminder that the house is a sacred place as well as a church. They call the house, the family, the domestic church.
Right.
Visible ways of seeing, of reminding ourselves of God. Even the idea, I always try to remind the young people I teach, as a Catholic, even just culturally, a pair of rosary beads that are going to last in your pocket. That's something that we as Catholics should develop that habit.
If you put your hand in your pocket, you touch them, etc. I'm holding my iPhone because there are many different applications now. We talked at the beginning of the show about you can download the rosary, and I understand that there are a few other sites as well where you can get some daily prayers, such as...
You can go to divineoffice.org, and they have an app.
ebreviary.com.
Yes.
Another thing I think is we come into now as we celebrate Holy Week. You know, a great opportunity is Holy Thursday, right? To go to, when we celebrate the Mass of the Lord's Supper, one of the great traditional things that people do is they do go to stations. They go to visit churches in the neighborhood. And I think that that's really important, because there's always a repository set up where the Blessed Sacrament, people go to different churches and pray. And I think that that's good as a reminder. You know, it's important for us to kind of recognize that we're on a pilgrimage, that we're not where we're supposed to be. We're always walking to that direction. And I would encourage people to take advantage of pilgrimages to different places, to take advantage of visiting to different churches. There's simple things that can have a real profound impact in one's spiritual life.
I have a question, though, about the power of silence in helping you pray, because this world is very loud.
It's noisy in every single way. I call it monkey chatter. It's so hard. If you've ever tried to pray for 5 minutes without your mind wandering, but to try to really,
it's impossible.
to try to really build a prayer life where you can sit just quietly and shut down all the monkey chatter. And if you can last through 5 minutes, you'll find that you have managed to outlast the monkey chatter. And then you can start really getting a sense of, I am here, God is present, and I can talk, or maybe I can just listen, or maybe God can just listen while I stomp my foot a little bit. But silence is so conducive to prayer. And if we can just take a few minutes, like you were talking about, people saying, you know, shut down your phone for 15 minutes. Getting centered and being quiet is is so conducive to getting through the rest of the day.
It's scary
I
think it's scary for a lot of people,
for a lot of people,
because I think that it's like you don't know what's going to happen in that silence.
Absolutely. It's like prayer for me is so exciting. My husband and I were talking about this, and he said, well, what is it for you? I said, it's exciting. Every single day I go into prayer, and I don't know what I'm going to encounter. I know I'm going to be challenged. It's almost like, you know, walking into the set of Indiana Jones every single day. And I know that sounds, yes, because
absolutely.
I don't know what I'm going to encounter, what I'm going to have to face in myself, or what's going to come out of me that I'm going to have to say, wow, Lord, I didn't even know that was in me, either for good or for bad.
Because sometimes prayer can be very hard work, and part of the experience of prayer is going into the desert sometime.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, Mother Teresa, and you know, if we go to that towards the end of at the end of her life, as we, you know, after she had died, Time, I think, or Newsweek had published that story about Mother Teresa didn't believe in God or something to that effect.
Doubts.
Right, her doubts. And I think the key thing about Mother Teresa, and I think is so true for a lot of people, is Mother Teresa didn't have the consolation of prayer. Right? She prayed and she believed in God, but she didn't have the consolation of that belief in prayer. And you know, the problem for us is we live in a consumeristic society that I put this in, I expect something out.
Right. What am I getting
What am I getting out of it?
I feel better.
And the point of prayer, going to church and everything else, is not what I get out of it, but something I offer as a free gift to God. And I think that that's really important too, that when we approach prayer, we recognize is that we owe God something for all the blessings that He has bestowed upon us. And I don't look for anything in return from Him. I'm just offering it to Him freely.
One of the desert mothers, Amma Synclasia, I think, said prayer was her rest and her work. It was real work sometimes.
And last word?
Prayer doesn't change God, it changes us. And our job is to be open to the will of God, a openness. And sometimes, as we were saying, prayer can be scary because we might learn something about ourselves if we're really open. The best model of prayer, obviously, is the Blessed Mother and her openness. If we think about it, we're going to, with the Feast of the Annunciation, she's there and she's waiting. She's able to hear. So that idea, of openness.
Openness, be open to prayer. Thank you all so much for being with us. We really appreciate it as we talk about the power of prayer. Thank you also for joining us. And remember that you don't need a TV to watch the net. We are always online at netny.net. For all of us here, I'm Jane Hansen. I'll see you next time in the arena.